Hello, little cryptids. I have an interesting video for you all today. When I started this channel, it was with the intent to share tips about art, story writing, and all of the creepy stuff that I love. From cryptids to ghosts, possessions to shadows. I intend to tell you my stories, maybe even other stories that I find or write myself. All of that aside, let me tell you about what is possibly one of the most disturbing personal stories that I've experienced. The time I saw the Hat Man. The Hat Man is supposedly a spirit that shows itself when something bad is about to happen. No one knows if he shows up just to warn you or if he brings the misfortune with him. He is a tall man in a top hat or wide-brimmed hat and a trench coat. His eyes have been reported as a neutral yellow or white, or as an angry red. People of all ages have reportedly seen him, and I believe that I have as well. When I was younger, a child, around 9 or 10, my family and I lived in a small one-story house. The house was slightly elevated off of the ground due to flooding rains that would strike the plains in the summer months. The small storm windows were as high as 13 feet off of the ground outside, and white blinds covered them most of the time. Outside of my little window was a rose bush that we had not tended since we bought the house 6 years prior. It grew wild and untamed. I remember staring out the window the night that I saw him. I had just turned off the light and was watching the specks of color float around my room. Something, I would find out later, was visual snow. I suddenly felt almost compelled to look at the window. My bed paralleled the window. I stared up at it. The light behind the blind seemed to be brighter than the normal light that came from the porch light. And then I saw a man step in front of the window. It was right outside. It had to be. His shadow curled so ever slightly to the bins and the blinds. His hat graced the top of the window itself. It was almost comical. He looked kind of like a detective silhouetted in the doorway of his office. Feel him looking at me from the other side of the window. I thought at first that I was sleeping, but then I heard it. A woman scream. It sounded like it was from a few houses down. It felt like it was from a few houses down. But somehow I knew whatever was at that window was the one who had made that sound. I knew that it saw me, but I didn't want to move. I thought maybe I could trick it into thinking that I wasn't awake. I knew that it knew I was awake. And then as soon as he had arrived, he was gone. I couldn't tell you how he disappeared. He didn't exit the other side of the window or fade away. He was simply there, and then he wasn't. I shot out of bed and ran to the living room where my sister had been watching a movie. She had her head poked out of the front door, frantically looking around. She said that she had heard a woman scream. I told her what I had seen, and she seemed confused. You see, my sister had just turned on the porch light the moment before opening the door, after she had heard the scream. We didn't know how I had seen the man in the window in the first place. He clearly had light behind him. He was clearly a silhouette, but we didn't know where the light had come from. My sister also knew that I hadn't been asleep because the whole ordeal had lasted about 3 minutes since I had gone to my room to lay down. As for my sister and I, we stayed in the living room watching cartoons until my parents got home. Naturally, as parents do, they didn't believe us. The next morning, my mother helped my sister and I call the non-emergency line to tell the police what we had experienced. Mainly because I was so adamant about it. On one hand, a scary man had been outside my window, or we had heard a woman get hurt. As for the supposed bad luck that comes with the Hat Man, we did experience some the following week. My parents announced their separation, and I lost a dear pet fish. I have visited that house since then, and have stayed in the spare room that used to be mine. And I still wonder sometimes, what if I looked past the blinds? What would I see? I hope that you have all enjoyed that real story. None of this was imagined or exaggerated. If you have any scary stories, please leave them down in the comments, and maybe one day, with permission of course, I'll wrap them all up and illustrate them. I would appreciate if you did the common YouTube things, such as share, subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and of course, have a good night, little cryptids.